What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here. Today we're going to talk about the Laiv Harmony DAC. You guys have been asking me about this thing for months. It came out about 6 months ago. It seems to be everyone's favorite DAC of 2024. You guys wanted my opinion, so I got a review sample. I've been listening to it for about 60 days now. I've tried all kinds of different speakers, 4 or 5 different amplifiers, and today we're going to talk about it. So let me get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about the unique features or what stood out to me. I'll tell you what the DAC sounds like, its tonal character, what it's good at, if there's any shortcomings, stuff like that. I'll tell you how it compares to some other DACs in and around the same price, like those big full-size DACs. I'll, of course, talk about how it compares to the DAC I've been using for years, my Aries 2. I feel like given the size, this might be a potential upgrade for a lot of people that have had something like the Aries, wanted to upgrade, but couldn't accommodate a big full-size DAC. I'll be honest, I'm projecting a little bit. That's the boat I'm in personally. For years, you guys have asked me why I don't upgrade my DAC, especially when I would review a big full-size DAC. And I'll tell everyone, I don't have any space in my rack. I cannot accommodate a full-size DAC. I can only accommodate something about the size of an Aries. With the Laiv Harmony, there's now an upgrade path for people like me who are limited on physical space. Now look, I know someone is going to say, Nemo, why don't you just get a bigger rack? Well, I don't want a bigger rack, first of all. And if I got a wider rack, I wouldn't be able to review dual subwoofers. And I'm kind of the subwoofer guy, so that's just not an option. Now, one other thing I want to mention is if you want to see some really good B-roll and like just the internals of this DAC and hear from someone that has a little bit more expertise than I do in circuitry and DACs in general, check out Sandu's review over on Sound News. The dude did an excellent job covering this and just the most beautiful pictures of the interior, the outside of the DAC. It's really good production quality. Link in the description below for Sandu's channel. But you're going to watch my video the whole way through before you check out his, okay? Because that's the best way to support my channel. I don't need no affiliate link, Patreon. I don't use any of that. Just watch the whole video, guys, and leave a thumbs up, all right? So let me tell you about the standout features, what I like about it. First, the remote. You guys, anytime I've reviewed a DAC, you've asked why there's no remote. And for a long time, I didn't understand why the remote control was so valuable to people. And then I realized, hey, I'm kind of unique. I only use a single source, but most other people, they have multiple sources. And you guys want to be able to change between your sources with the remote control. Maybe you want to change between OS and NOS, or, from the remote. Maybe you just want to adjust the brightness without getting up. That is all understandable. And now that I've used a DAC with a remote, I very much understand the convenience and why people want this feature. Love it. The remote control is nice machined billet aluminum, as is the casework, which is the next standout feature. The casework on the Laiv Harmony is absolutely beautiful. Excellent fit and finish, beautiful machining inside and out, and beautiful parts selection and circuit layout. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to the internals and the circuit layout. Check out Sandu's review for that kind of stuff, guys. Beautiful monochromatic OLED display. I like to see that. I'm the type of person that doesn't actually like when hi-fi products have screens on them. I find most of the screens on hi-fi products to be washed out, low quality, kind of look like old LCD displays to my eyes. Think something like the Ever Solo. I would prefer the DMP A6 specifically, sorry. I think it's a nice looking streamer. Sure, it's reasonably priced, but I think the low quality display makes it look cheap, and I'd rather have either no display or a monochromatic OLED. Personally, the Hagel H190 is another great example of a good monochromatic OLED display. It looks classy. The blacks are deep. It's easy to read from across the room. I love it. One other cool thing about this remote control is it has some function buttons that you can program. For example, I've got my function 1 button set up to just immediately switch between OS and NOS mode on the fly. That was very convenient. You can also make some adjustments from the front. There's a little knob you can interact with, change between your different inputs and other menu functions. You can also switch between OS and NOS or phase, or change the brightness from the front of the unit. And the cool thing is when you press down, it's also a button. You don't have to worry about the DAC moving around because the button is right over one of the spikes. Really cool, intelligent design. The last thing I like about the menu system is it's not overly complicated. There are DACs like the RME ADI2 where I swear you need a degree in computer science to understand the menu system. There is such an overwhelming amount of options. You have to literally learn how to use the DAC. The Laiv Harmony, for the most part, is a set it and forget it purist piece with some modern creature comforts that just make it easier to interact with. Around back, you have your 2 sets of analog outputs, either single-ended RCA or balanced XLR. Then you also have your 4 digital inputs, your coax, your optical, your I2S, and your USB. Next, you guys are going to ask, how did I use the DAC? Which did I use? Well, when I review DACs, I always do it the same way. I only use coax. Now I know you guys are going to get upset. You're going to say, Nemo, why don't you use I2S? Nemo, why don't you use USB? Coax isn't the best way to use a DAC. This thing's $2,800. You should be using I2S. I understand, but I don't have an I2S source. I use the Bluesound Node 2i. I have it upgraded with the LHY power supply, and that Bluesound Node only has coax out for digital. Okay, that's my only option, guys. And like anyone else, I have a finite amount of money. I can't constantly upgrade my gear every time something new comes out. So I'm still using the Bluesound Node 2i because it's not broken and it works just fine. Now, for the record, every other DAC I've ever reviewed, I have also used coax out. So when we get to the comparisons, the Laiv Harmony and all these other DACs I've ever reviewed will be on an equal playing field, okay? Trying to see if there's anything else until I tell you what it sounds like. Packaging was beautiful too, by the way, guys. This was a very luxurious unboxing experience. I never talk about stuff like that because packaging just never matters to me, but like I felt like I had $1 million item in front of me, just the way it was all like packaged so beautifully. All right, look, let me tell you what the darn thing sounds like, because at the end of the day, that nice OLED display, that nice remote, the build quality, internals, and none of it matters if it's not the sound you're looking for and things like that. So sound quality, let's start with the high frequencies. Actually, you know what? Before I get into that, let me tell you what R2R DAC sound signature is known for. And I'll do this quickly. R2R DACs are known for having a fair amount of detail, but they're not the most hyper-detailed presentations like chip-based counterparts. They're going to be more natural. Moving down to the mid-range, they're generally more holographic. They expand your mid-range and your soundstage. And moving down to the bass, they're generally linear. I don't feel R2R DACs have any tonal character in the bass region. And all R2R DACs, so they have the same like mid-range and treble characteristics, just in varying degrees, okay? Like, you know, obviously like a cheaper R2R DAC, more expensive one, it's going to be different, you know, but generally they're going to expand the sound stage, give a little bit of warmth, a little bit of organics, things like that. The Laiv Harmony and the high frequencies, mostly neutral in terms of its treble quantity. Its attack is not sharp, nor is it soft, but it is fairly refined and easy on the ears. There's a good amount of detail, space, and separation in the treble region. And one thing I really like about the Harmony DAC and the way it presents detail is some DACs, especially like the hyper detailed type, they take all the treble that's layered within the soundstage and they push it forward, front, and center. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a really cool and fun presentation. But personally, I like the way the Harmony delivers the treble detail is by keeping the soundstage layered. If the treble detail is supposed to be further back, it remains further back in time and space. It just seems like the background is darker, it's easier to hear, it comes out in a more effortless manner, and it's a more natural way to give good, clean, and clear detail. Again, if you are the hyper detail or detail obsessed customer, you may prefer something chip-based, like something by chord, for example. That's generally not the sound I like, however. Moving down in the mid-range, this is going to be the star of the show for the Harmony. The Harmony's mid-range is really what blew me away. I've reviewed many other DACs, and in the past, I've never felt a DAC upgrade or change was a big difference. I've always said publicly that I felt DAC changes were more nuanced. That was not the case with the Harmony. When I first set this thing up, I wasn't like, wow, right away. I was listening, I was like, wow, yeah, this mid-range is considerably more holographic than what I'm used to, sure. There's quite a bit more air and space. Yeah, no doubt. Okay. There's more depth in my soundstage. Okay. And I kept listening and I kept listening and I was impressed more and more over time. And then somewhere around the 30-day mark, I went back to my Aries 2 And my Aries 2 straight up sounded congested by direct comparison. I've never had this experience. I love my Aries 2. I've loved my Aries for a long time. It's a fantastic DAC. It's considerably cheaper, you know, depending on which one you get. It's about $700 to $1,100. I've got two versions. I have the 12th one and the original Aries 2. But the mid-range of the Aries sounded congested. It sounded closed off. It sounded veiled by direct comparison because the harmony was giving me so much more openness, so much more expansiveness, such a larger and more effortless soundstage. The Aries simply can't keep up. The interesting thing is that the Laiv Harmony does all this without changing the tonal character of my speakers. And that's what I love about it the most. Essentially what it's doing is it's giving me all the goodness in the mid-range that a hyper detail analytical speaker might have, but I can get that out of a warm speaker when I use the Harmony DAC, because I'm the type of guy, I like warm speakers a lot, like the Bucard S400, like the Spendor Classic 3.1. I like speakers that are dark in the treble, super warm and rich and organic in the mid-range, big fat juicy bass. But conversely, I like hyper detailed speakers that might be cool or even dry in the mid-range. I like a hyper detailed presentation. I don't mind if a speaker's over analytical. And sometimes I wish I could have both at the same time, but that's kind of impossible. But again, with the Harmony, it gives me the goodness of a hyper detailed mid-range. But my speaker, if I'm using something like the Bucard S400 or Spendor Classic 3.1, the speaker remains warm, organic, tonally rich, and all those things. Moving down to the bass was tight, the bass was full, it was confident, it was not overdone in any particular frequency. It had good transients, note-to-note distinction, and articulation. I did not have any complaints about the bass. So with that said, let's do some quick comparisons. Let's start with, let's say you have just the factory DAC, internal DAC on like $1,000 amp or $1,000 streamer, something like an Eversolo DMP A6, for example. What can you expect if you upgrade to something like the Aries? When you upgrade to something like the Laiv Harmony. Well, if you have an Eversolo DMP A6 and you put the Laiv Harmony on it, you're going to get a little bit better detail, a little bit more natural sounding detail. That's an area I feel the Eversolo suffers. I don't think its treble quality sounds very natural. With the Laiv Harmony, it's going to sound more natural. You're going to have more air space separation and a more effortless treble presentation. Moving down to the mid-range, you're going to get a lot more holographics. You're going to get a wider, deeper, and more holographic soundstage. You're going to get a lot more air and space and separation in the mid-range. That singer is going to sound like they've got a ton of space. Their voice is going to sound more effortless. You're going to have more precise imaging, but not to the point it sounds unnatural or artificial. This imaging is very precise and very natural at the same time. Moving down to the bass, you're going to have good, clean, confident, linear bass. You're not going to have any complaints there, I assure you. And then when you test going back, after you've listened to the Laiv Harmony with something like an Eversolo, you try to go back to that Eversolo internal DAC, you're going to think it was broken. I mean that. It's going to be a night and day difference. It's going to be a drastic difference. Same could be said for any other internal DAC. If you're using the internal DAC of something like a Billy-amp, for example, or the internal DAC on a Bluesound Node 2i or Cambridge MXN10, using the Laiv Harmony by direct comparison is going to be a pretty substantial upgrade. It's going to blow your mind. You're going to have a situation where when you try to go back to the old one, you're going to think something's broken. I assure you it's not. The Laiv Harmony is just so effortless with its mid-range. It's hard to imagine that you were listening to such a congested sound previously without even realizing it. So yeah, if you're on the internal DAC right now, this is going to be a substantial upgrade. Let's say you got something like an Aries 2. What can you expect? I think this is the most logical upgrade for someone with an Aries 2, because if you have an Aries 2, you probably appreciate the size. You probably don't want a massive DAC. What can you expect? Let's start with the top end. And look, keep in mind, I love the Aries, guys. Don't think I'm dogging it. Don't get FOMO just because I'm about to do this comparison. I love the Aries. I think it's a fantastic DAC, especially for its price. Again, around $700 to $1,100, depending which one you get. So both DACs have similar inputs and outputs, unless you have a very old version of the Aries. For the most part, most of them have I2S. Sorry, guys, there's so many versions of the Aries. I can't go through all of them, but I have personally currently own the Aries 2 and 12-1 with its billet aluminum enclosure. So Aries does not have a remote or a display of any kind. The Laiv Harmony does have a remote and a display, so it's just a little bit easier to use. Its quality of life improvements are without a doubt just welcome, right? They both have OS and NOS functions. I did feel the NOS and OS functions on the Laiv Harmony were more pronounced. They were more obvious. It was very easy for me to just hear those differences, right? In OS mode, the Laiv Harmony just really cleaned things up, gave me more clarity in that mid-range, more air and space around the singer. They projected forward into the room more. In NOS mode, everything sounded fine, just maybe a little more natural, but also a little darker by direct comparison. I would say it's this simple. If you're more of the hyper detailed customer, I think you will like oversampling mode. If you are more the customer who likes tone and texture, you may prefer non-oversampling mode. I liked both and found that it really depended what speakers I was using. When I was using very analytical speakers like my Platinum, I preferred the non-oversampling mode. When I was using darker speakers like my Bucard S400, I liked the oversampling mode quite a bit. Sorry, back to the comparison. So look, in the high frequencies, both of these DACs are really great for their price point, but look, the Laiv Harmony has more air, more space. It's more effortless in the treble region. It's more refined. It gives you more detail. It's easier on the ears. It images better, all while sounding more natural. It's not even close in the treble region. The Laiv Harmony is a really big upgrade coming from something like the Aries. Moving down to the mid-range, again, this is a really big difference. Like, there's a big price disparity between these two DACs, so this should come as no surprise to anyone. The mid-range of the Laiv Harmony is much more holographic, has considerably more depth to it. There's more air and space around instruments and the singer. There's just a more expansive and natural sound overall, and even more emotionally engaging than something like the Aries. Moving down to the bass on the Aries is a little bit fun. It's a little bit juiced up. The Laiv is a little bit tighter, a little bit quicker, a little bit better transients. This isn't a massive difference to my ears. It's more the difference between fun bass that the Aries has and just tighter, more accurate bass that the Laiv has. Overall, this is still a pretty big upgrade if you own something like the Aries. The Laiv Harmony is something you're going to like very much. But how does the Laiv compare to something like its price, something like the Denafrips Venus 2? That's a big full-size DAC, $3,100. Let's talk about it. Now, when I got this review sample and I saw the size, I thought the Laiv Harmony DAC would be like a high-end laptop. If you haven't noticed, the best bang for buck in laptops is your standard size 15 to 16 inch laptop. If you want a 12 or 13 inch laptop to have the same power as a standard size laptop, you're generally going to pay 50% more money because it costs more money to make those razor thin laptops have just as much power as their full size counterparts. And I thought the Laiv Harmony DAC would be a similar situation. I thought, you know what, it's probably going to perform really well for its physical size, but maybe not compete with the full size DAC the same price. This is where I was wrong. The Venus 2 and the Laiv Harmony DAC have darn near equivalent treble quality. They're both very refined. They're both easy on the ears. They're good, very detailed, but in a natural way. They both retain the layering in the sound stage. Both of these DACs were giving me good, high quality detail and just treble overall with nice natural imaging. If I had to give an edge to one or the other, I will say the Venus 2 seemed to have maybe 4 or 5% more treble air space and separation in the top frequencies, but the treble quality overall on both DACs easily on par with each other. Moving down to the mid-range, however, things got a little bit different. I liked the Venus 2 a lot. I gave that thing a glowing review. The only reason I didn't buy one for myself is the size. It's just too big for me. The Laiv Harmony mid-range I found had more space. It wasn't as big of a difference compared to something like the Aries 2. You know, with the Laiv versus the Aries 2, this was like night and day. The Laiv versus the Venus 2, the Harmony, still more air and space. Still more space around the singer. The singer's going to be pushed out more into the room, more effortless presentation, more layering within the sound stage, more holographics. If the Aries 2 Harmony was night and day, I would say the Venus 2 mid-range to the Harmony mid-range is somewhere between nuance and night and day, somewhere in the middle of that. It's a clear sonic upgrade to my ears. Moving down to the bass, I felt the bass on both DACs was about equal. I didn't feel one had any advantage over the other, and that's a compliment to the Laiv because the Laiv is substantially smaller. So the Laiv Harmony and the Venus 2 are both very good. I felt the biggest standout difference is the mid-range of the Laiv Harmony just being a little bit more holographic and having just a more expansive sound overall. That's really the best word. It's more expansive overall. So that's that comparison out of the way. I did use a bunch of different amplifiers. I used the Burnoco Terra 8-watt tube amplifier from South Korea. I used the Willsenton R300 Plus B from China. I used the Thomason Stereo EL34 Galion. I, of course, used my Kinky Studio preamp and monoblocks. I used a bunch of different kinds of speakers. I used my Platimons. I used the Cabas Murano, the Spendor Classic 3.1. I even used the inexpensive pair of Sir Vega LA165s I have in for review. I, of course, used my Bucard S400 Mark IIs and my ATC SCM11s. Like I said, I've had this DAC for over 60 days now. I've definitely put it through its paces. With that said, I think we're at the tail end of the review, guys, here. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. This YouTube channel also has a free Discord. Link is in the description, as well as don't forget that link to Sandu's channel, Sound News. Great B-roll. Check him out. Until next time, guys, take care.